Welcome to my spell guide for the Mercenary exclusive spells. Now, before I start, two things. Number one, please check the excellent Puzzle Quest 3 spell guide from the Throne of Odin. Here you can see where can you find each one of the different spells that I'm going to talk about, which are these column, the Mercenary exclusive spells. As you can see, they are color coded and you can easily see, for example, I want to farm Ambuscade, so I need to go to dungeon number 8, the Doomhold, and open chests with the Mercenary. Excellent guide to follow. And the second thing is I'm going to do an overview of the spells. Please take everything I say in this video with a reasonable amount of salt. This is not gospel. This is not, I cannot speak about each interaction in this game. There are lots of equipment. There are a lot of spells that can interact with each other. So this is just an overview. All right. That being said, let's start. The Mercenary, as you can see, has red as primary color and green as secondary color. This means two things. Number one, at level 50, the Mercenary gains 100 points to its base Fire Mastery, because it's the primary color, and 50 points to its green base Mastery, because it's its secondary color. And the second thing is that the Mercenary has 5 red exclusive spells, 3 green exclusive spells, 1 yellow, 1 blue, and 1 purple exclusive spells. So let's start with the red ones. I have filtered them in alphabetical order, so let's talk about them. First of all is Bounty Hunt. Deals missile damage, and if greed is active, there is a 70% chance to add 2 more stacks. This percentage doesn't change depending on the rarity. However, it changes depending on your spellbook level. So it's 30% plus your spellbook level. At maximum level, it will be an 80% chance. Missile damage and melee damage are both considered physical. The difference is if you're in PvP, your opponent's resistances, or some enemies in PvE as well, but it's considered a physical attack. Now, for 150 cost, in my opinion, this is not very good. If these added greed stacks when you didn't have them, it would be great because it will allow you to add greed stats on round 2, which is quite difficult on a regular build, or even on round 1 if you are using if you're in a spell rush event, or if you're using essences in events. But with a cost of 150 mana, just this amount of physical damage and a relatively small amount to add more stacks, in my opinion, is not very good. It can work if you have a high gold bonus build with a Buccaneer set and Kasuli helm and a guard's belt and so on. But it's a bit, yeah, a bit niche use in my opinion. The next one is Confident Slice. 115 cost, destroy a row of gems that you choose, deal melee damage with a 65% chance to create 2 skulls for each one destroyed. Again, this chance doesn't depend on the rarity of the spell. However, it depends on your spellbook level, so it's 25 plus your spellbook level. This is a very interesting spell if you're going to use a red physical build. It deals physical damage, which is good, and it also has a chance to generate extra skulls. Of course, it depends on how many skulls you already have in a row. And remember that any gem or skull that is already in a match cannot be destroyed. But these ones that you destroy, those skulls are not eliminated and the gems are not eliminated from the point of view that you are still getting the mana from the gems, and the skulls will go to the top of the screen. It will be counted as the number of skulls you're using that turn. So a decent uh, spell for a physical build. The next one is Greedy Rage. Deal melee damage, adding 16% for each stack of greed you have. And this percentage does increase depending on the rarity. So this is a spell that you want to prioritize, get very high rarity, and try to get as many greed stacks as you can. Again, there are certain items in the Buccaneer set that can increase the chances to spawn a greed stack. Still, the chances are not very high. If I remember correctly, are 10%. Which one is it? Let me check. No. The ring. Yeah, Mercenary, 10% chance to spawn a greed gem. So it is not very easy to get lots of greed gems. You can use, for example, a Kasduli crossbow to increase your ultimate spell mana, like this one. Well, not this one. This one is purple, but a red one. I believe I have a red Kasduli. Yeah, right here. I have this one, for example. And yeah, you can use it together with the bounty hunt spell to increase the damage. So it can be a very good spell in a dedicated physical build, but you really need to work to make it work very well. So increase the rarity a lot and use certain pieces of equipment and certain other spells so you can really pump up the damage. Yes, 22% is very good, but again, how many stacks of greed can you realistically get in a short period of time? The next one is Searing Strike. And Searing Strike is completely different to the others because this is an elemental spell. And as you increase the rarity, it also increases the damage. In this case, it can work with red or green gems, but I haven't found a way to make it work in a dual red and green build. However, I do have a specific Searing Strike build. I made a video about it, please watch it. And this spell is not as strong as similar elemental spells. For example, this one at maximum is going to be 8% per gem. If we compare it with the Assassin's Night Blade, this one gets at maximum rarity 11%. If we compare it with the common Frost Bolt, at maximum rarity, the Frost Bolt increases it by 16%. So it's not as strong as other similar spells, but still it's a viable build. That's why I make a video about it. It's the build I use for PvP. Unfortunately, I don't have good equipment on it. These are mostly hand-me-downs. So yeah, it's workable if you want a red elemental build, but as I said, this is the odd one in the mercenary set of spells, which are mostly for physical builds. And last but not least, when it comes to red spells, we have Shakedown. deal fire damage, and destroy skull gems. The number of skull gems is increased depending on the rarity, and it will also destroy an extra skull gem for each stack of greed. Now, you can use this one with the Searing Strike build, so an elemental build, because it's going to deal elemental damage. And those destroyed skulls will go on the top, so they are not completely eliminated. They are added to your physical attack. But if you're using an elemental build, your physical attack is going to be very small. However, it helps clean the board of skull gems that you are not going to use with an elemental build, which will give you additional chances to spawn more red gems instead. You can also use it with a physical build. Again, it's going to deal elemental damage, but those skulls are going to be added to the total amount of skulls that you get. So it can work with both a physical and an elemental build. Those are the 5 red mercenary exclusive spells. Next, let's talk about green spells. Again, in alphabetical order, the first one is Dirty Blade. Dirty Blade deals poison damage, and if greed is active, it generates skull gems. The amount of skull gems it generates depends on their rarity, as you can see, with 8 at the maximum level. Excellent spell if you are going to go for a green physical build. Again, I have a video about green physical mercenary, and it uses Dirty Blade. Green doesn't have any generic skull green spell generators. Excuse me. Green spell skull generators as common. They have to be different class exclusives, and this is the one for the mercenary. Excellent spell if you want a physical green mercenary. The next one is obviously Find Weakness, and Find Weakness is just so good that it's really hard to make an argument for a red physical mercenary over a green physical mercenary, and it's just because of this spell. This is so darn good that honestly, just go green. Really. As you can see, at maximum rarity, it increases your critical hit chance, also your critical hit damage. The critical hit damage doesn't depend on your rarity, as you can see, but it does increase with your spellbook. So at a level 50 spellbook, it will go up to 75%. And it also drains the enemy's mana. As I said, it's so darn good that my physical green mercenary uses both Find Weakness and Dirty Blade, and it's an excellent build. And when you add on top of that how many good pieces of equipment you have with green builds, starting with the Amulet of the First, then adding a second Ancient Dragon piece of equipment for the additional 4 bonus gems every turn. Then we have the Serpentine set, starting with the pants, which are awesome. And then we can continue with the Dreamhold set, which is another excellent set for green builds. So yeah, go green. Finally, we have the third green spell for the mercenary, which is Poison Edge. Create a number of green or red gems depending on the rarity, with a percentage chance that depends on your spellbook level to poison the enemy for 4 turns. Not very good, honestly. If you are going to use a mix between red and green spells for a mercenary, yes, it can be very good, but this is very inconsistent. And if you need one color for one round and you get the other one, yeah, good luck with that. And poisoning, there are so many green spells, and pieces of equipment like the serpentine shoulders that can poison the opponent, that, yeah, mm, not a particularly good spell. That's for green. Next, let's talk about blue. In blue, we have this spell, which is Precaution. 150 mana cost, which is not a small amount, heals life, and if greed is active, you also gain a percentage of your maximum resistance that depends on the rarity of the spell. Generally speaking, resistance is not as good as armor because you you don't want to let your opponents cast spells in the first place. If the opponents can cast spells, you're pretty dead most of the time. So it's better to use armor. And this is blue. And in blue we have the generic ice armor, which increases your armor and ice resistance. And if you're willing to pay a little bit more, we have, I think is this one. No, it's not Winter Mists. Let me see if I can find it. I can't remember the... Was it this one? I don't think so. Frostborn? No. Huh. I can't remember exactly right now. What was the name of the spell? It's not this one either. Oh my god, I'm having a brain fart. Icy Terror? Nope. Okay, let me change the color because sometimes they bug out and they don't show up. And yeah, I cannot find it. It's not Sword of Light, it's not Harpoon Shot. Well, there is one spell that I cannot find right now. Okay, Deep Waves, finally. Deep Waves. It costs 190 mana, which is a lot, but it gains armor and resistance. And if you are under a certain percentage of health, it also deals damage to the enemy. So if you really want a very defensive blue spell that is going to help you when you're playing on auto mode, go for Deep Waves. So yeah, Precaution, a good idea on paper, but in reality not that good of a spell. Next, let's talk yellow. And in yellow, you have an excellent spell with pay the price, pay in advance. 120 mana, you gain power, which will increase both your physical and elemental damage, and 5% gold bonus. Okay. And if greed is active, it deals melee damage. The problem with this spell is that it's yellow. And yellow is not the strongest color. And this is a physical spell, a spell for physical builds, even when power also increases your elemental damage, but you're also dealing melee damage with it. And yellow doesn't have any spell that can generate skulls. So not good for a mono yellow build. I don't think it's good enough. However, it can be very good in a rainbow build, which I will talk about a bit later. Finally, the last element is purple, and we have Ambuscade. And Ambuscade costs 120 mana. It deals dark damage, so it's an elemental spell. And if Greed is active, it has a chance to stun. This chance increases depending on rarity up to 55%. Now, 55% is not reliable, but if you're, for example, farming the 5000s in story mode, you can play with Ambuscade. This is going to be a pretty good spell to deal damage, and it also has a chance to stun. So if you want to go with a full purple elemental build, yeah, it can work well, And even if you want to use a physical purple build with Dark Fire Gaze to generate skulls, yeah, it can be a useful spell. Again, the chance to stun is not reliable, but when it works, it works. Finally, I said before that I wanted to talk about the possibility of a rainbow build, and this is something that I believe I talk about in another video, but I'm not 100% sure. But if we use Ice Storm together with Find Weakness, where are you? Are you at the bottom? Yes, of course you are. Then pay in advance, and finally Darkfire Gaze for the skull generation. You can have a pretty decent rainbow build. You use Ice Storm to explode gems and generate mana. Find weakness both offensively and defensively. The defensive part is to drain the enemy's mana, and the offensive part is to increase critical hit chance and critical damage. Pay in advance, also as an offensive spell that is going to slowly but surely increase your power and deal melee damage. And finally, Darkfire Gaze to generate skull gems, together obviously with a good loadout that I don't have here because this is just the example for this video. So yeah, this is my overview about the different exclusive spells for the Mercenary. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, please like, comment, subscribe, and thank you very much for watching.